And welcome back to the Constitution Line by Line. Paul Fabrizio here.
Don Frazier.
Over there.
Over here. That's right. I'm Don Frazier. And I'm doing history, you're doing political science, and we have now reached a milestone in this series.
I don't know how many lines this is. Do you know the number, actually?
Man, it's a lot of lines. I think total there's somewhere in the neighborhood of 180. I'm looking quizzically at our studio assistant.
But anyway.
Hey, I'm looking at various charts and things we have on the wall. There's a lot of lines in the Constitution, but not as many as you would think.
Right. We have accomplished, let's say there's 100 or so.
Yeah.
We've covered an awful lot of territory in actually not that many words.
Yeah.
When you really think about it.
It's a genius document in terms of economy of language.
Yeah. Yeah, and you compare it to, for example, the Texas Constitution.
Oh, my gosh.
Which is like 200 pages
Just a
long.
dump truck load of stuff.
Yeah, and every 2 years we vote on new amendments to the Constitution that have to be approved by the people, and there's like sometimes 12 or 13 amendments.
And a bunch of the amendments are just undoing previous amendments.
Yeah, and it's just ridiculous.
It's
but
a
anyway.
bizarre way to do things, but that's the Texas Constitution, line by line, which will not be done by us.
No way. I don't know anybody who would.
Yeah, that would be a tough one.
Yeah. So anyway, we are here to finish the United States Constitution, the original part, and then we're going to take up the amendments. So this is the last article, Article 7.
Okay.
And this really is just a historical curiosity. So the ratification of the conventions of 9 states shall be sufficient for the establishment of this Constitution between the states so ratifying the same.
So 9 out of 13.
9 out of 13. That's what they're saying. The framers created a new government. They had the Articles of Confederation. They stepped away from it, various members of that, and they met in secret, if you will, to create a new form of government. And then they said, this government, it's not an amendment to the old one.
This is a whole new government.
This is a whole new government. And for it to take effect, we need 9 states meeting in convention to approve it.
So a little better than 2/3.
Yeah, a little better than
but
2/3.
not 3/4.
Right. And remember, there was 13 colonies, so we need 9 states. As soon as we got it, we're going.
So they're overthrowing their government.
They are.
That's essentially what's going on here.
And we don't think about that, but that is a really good way to describe it.
Yeah, I mean, they are overthrowing their existing government, and nobody's grabbing a musket. Nobody's trundling a cannon.
No.
They're going to do it through a process. Now, what if the Articles of Confederation government doesn't go for
it? That's one of those questions I don't think there's a good answer for, but many of the people who were meeting as part of the legislature in the Articles of Confederation realized that wasn't working, so they slipped over and they joined this one.
That's exactly right. I mean, so you had a lot of overlap.
Yeah.
And a bunch of those guys in the Articles of Confederation government were going, yeah, this needs to die a peaceful death. Not everybody was happy about it. Correct. I mean, Rhode Islanders were kind of a little nervous about it.
Yeah, they finally approved it. Ratified it later on.
Yeah, much later on.
Yeah.
But yeah, there was some pushback by some of the delegations, and I think it's interesting that you had to get 9, and you can still tell the 4. Well, then go on your own way.
Right, and 9 is interesting because you want more than a majority, but I think the framers also realized getting 11 or 12 might have been impossible.
Well, and they probably counted votes.
Oh, I'm sure they did.
And they said, who are the soreheads here?
Exactly.
Rhode Island.
Yeah.
Delaware may be, plus or minus on that. And one of the big sticking points with the Articles of Confederation government was the need to be unanimous in amending it.
Yeah.
And so we have abandoned that because it was unworkable.
Right. And by getting 9, you basically say that we're going to have to get representatives from the North and representatives from the South to approve this.
This can't be a purely regional.
Yeah, but it can't just be a regional kind of government.
But, I mean, you got 4 New England states that could have been recalcitrant.
They could have been, but they weren't.
But they weren't.
Yeah, and again, you're talking about politicians, practical politicians, who saw what wasn't working. They said, we got to come up with a whole different way. James Madison was really a big thinker behind all this. And how can we go about doing that? And then now that we've created this system, now we got to make sure it's going to pass.
Yeah.
And so.
Well, and I pick on New England, but it could have been 4 southern states.
Yeah, very easily.
Could have been Georgia, the Carolinas, and Virginia. Now, a lot of people say, well, those are all the slaveholding states, which is incorrect. Mm-hmm. All the states were slaveholding states at the time, but a bunch of them get rid of it very, very quickly.
Right. And James Madison was from Virginia.
Yeah.
And everybody thought that once this new government comes into place, George Washington of Virginia would become the new president.
Virginia's driving this train,
Yeah.
and probably by design.
Yeah, but at the same time, Virginia had problems getting to approval of this. In Virginia, there were issues. And, of course, it was out of this that came the Federalist Papers.
Yes.
Written by Alexander Hamilton and John
of New York.
John Jay
of New York,
and
Monroe.
Was it
of
Monroe?
Virginia.
Was it James Monroe? Was the other one? Or was
Madison. Those M's from Virginia.
Yeah, they all run together. So anyway, they sat down and they constructed these articles to support the ratification of this Constitution. And it became known as the Federalist Papers, and they were newspaper articles that defended their vision of the Constitution. And that went out, and supposedly that was important in trying to convince delegates.
Yeah, it's almost like having a concordance to Scripture. So here's what the writer meant.
Yes.
When Luke says this is what Luke is meaning.
Yes. And one of the things that's interesting is apparently a lot of people read the Federalist Papers. As they came out with a new article, Alexander Hamilton, of course, wrote the most of them.
Yeah.
And
but they were all anonymous. And so people have had to go back and try to guess who the authors were. But you're right. Hamilton, before he took to Broadway.
Yeah. I think he wrote 56, according to a song in there.
Yeah.
So they just set out and they said, we've got to lay out the arguments for this, the Federalist position. And it was, of course, out of that debate that was taking place in the states that then led to the issue of the Bill of Rights.
Yeah.
And we are missing things in this Constitution. You framers, you worked really hard. You created this government.
You did well. But
come on.
There's some stuff that y'all should have thought about that is very important to me that y'all completely overlooked because you're not me.
Yeah. So, we credit the framers with so much. But one of the things that I think we don't give them enough credit for was the realization that their government that they were creating, this constitutional government, didn't have enough in this document. And they were open enough, some with great reluctance, to amending it immediately.
Well, because some people said it says what it means what it said.
Yeah, the strict interpretation.
Absolutely. I mean, it's like that bumper sticker I saw near a Baptist church that said, God said it, I believed it, that settles it.
Right.
Well, if you transfer that to our new secular religion, Constitution says it, I believe it, that settles it.
And there's some people going, wait a second, what about freedom of religion? Where's that in there?
Well, it's in there by not being in there. They got no jurisdiction.
I'm sorry. And there's some people are saying, wait a second, those politicians.
Article 1, 2, and 3 gave nobody jurisdiction over freedom of religion.
Yeah, I'm sorry. There's those politicians. You never know what they might do.
Well, they got that bungee cord clause in there.
Yeah, the necessary and proper clause, the elastic clause.
It might be necessary and proper to declare the United States an Episcopal country.
There you go. So we need some protections here. So how about a Bill of Rights? So that is what's going to come next. The first amendments to this document.
But for our purposes, the Constitution line by line, the original Constitution line by line, is done.
Is done. It ends right now. Okay. But we'll be back.
Yeah, but we're not going anywhere. So if you're tired of seeing us, well, that's on you. Yeah. You can always tune out. But if you want to see how this story continues, you're going to have to keep watching.
We'll be back.
All right, that's our line one. We'll get into the Bill of Rights next time.